Butler.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Armed Forces Week, it is highly appropriate to be debating funding for our brave Armed Forces personnel, and I was honoured on Monday to attend the flag-raising ceremony organised by Buckinghamshire Council in Aylesbury. It was an important moment to pay tribute to all those who serve, whether as regulars, reserves or cadets. And I'm proud to be a member of a Conservative Party that has an unequivocal commitment to defence, that recognises that it is essential to have strong, well-equipped armed forces to protect our nation and our allies, that is investing to tackle new and emerging threats from both established and developing hostile parties. So I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend and his colleagues in the Ministry of Defence on securing a substantial increase in real terms for our armed forces, with planned expenditure increasing by 4.9% last financial year, further increases above 5% for 2021-22 and 22-23, real terms increases. But naturally, a further increase would be very welcome. I do believe, though, that it is incumbent upon us to bear in mind broader fiscal pressures, particularly as we continue to deal with the profound economic shock of the pandemic. And along with members of both sides of the House, I too pay tribute to the many members of the armed forces who've contributed to the country's tremendous effort to combat COVID-19 in recent months. Madam Deputy Speaker, my constituency is home to two Royal Air Force bases, RAF Halton and RAF High Wycombe. RAF High Wycombe is in fact in the village of Knaphill and Walters Ash and is home to Air Command and to the new and exciting Space Command. As the MOD has made clear, and I quote, "Space and our assured access to it is fundamental to military operations. The threat from adversaries in this rapidly evolving operational domain is real, and it is here now." So I'm very pleased to see the investment in the establishment of a UK Space Command for Defence, and proud that its home is in my constituency. RAF Halton, near Wendover, is one of the oldest RAF bases in the country, having been used since 1913 and bought from a member of the Rothschild family 5 years later at a very competitive price. There are First World War training trenches still in situ, and the officers' mess is in the splendid Halton House, which has featured in many films and TV dramas ranging from James Bond to The Crown, Poirot to Bridgerton. Revenue raised from hiring out the house provides welcome additional funding to the MOD. Today, Halton is one of the largest RAF stations and home to approximately 2,000 personnel from all three armed forces, to foreign military, to contractors and to civilians. It is the base where many of the Royal Air Force's new recruits begin their careers, as the station's primary role is to train military and civilian personnel to perform to the highest standard for military operations. Last month, I was fortunate enough to be invited as a guest for the graduation of Pearson intake. Talking to the recruits then highlighted the huge range of roles that are necessary for a successful military. One was going on to serve as a chef, another to work in cyber, an ever-increasing and pernicious threat. The pride of the men and women on the parade ground, as well as their families in the stands, was testament to what the armed forces are all about: duty, honour and service. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Member for Islington North said earlier he wanted to see hope for the future. He need look no further than the brilliant recruits coming out of RAF Halton to see not just hope, but talent, commitment and profound belief in the need for the armed forces to safeguard peace. It is not just in my constituency that I've seen such dedication to serving our nation. Over the past year, I've been lucky enough to participate in the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme. One of the highlights was undoubtedly visiting RAF Marham, where my uncle Gordon served as a pilot of Vulcan bombers at the height of the Cold War. It was a privilege to sit in an F-35 and talk to the heroic pilots and crews who are currently taking on Daesh while on deployment on HMS Queen Elizabeth. The F-35 programme is clearly bringing huge strategic and tactical advantage. But the government has recognised that there's always a need to go further, and this is well demonstrated in the investment of more than £2 billion in the Future Combat Air System, which will deliver a mix of crewed, uncrewed and autonomous platforms, including swarming drones and the Tempest fighter jet, already creating hundreds of jobs, as my honourable friend, the member for Filton and Bradley Stoke, has described. This is on top of £6.6 billion going into R&D projects. Alongside this very welcome investment in cutting-edge technology, I've also been reassured to hear from ministers before today the recognition that accommodation and facilities for our service personnel need and deserve improvement. Conditions in some bases are not always as good as they ought to be, and it is only right that attention is paid to them. Mr Deputy Speaker, questions have been raised about funding a new national flagship. I have to say that for my part, I'd regard this as a very good and wise investment, even in terms of financial constraint. It is clear that the role for such a vessel would be to promote trade. This is surely in keeping with the recognition of a growing interdependence between defence and the protection of our economic security. As the integrated review says, we will play a more active part in sustaining an international order in which open societies and economies continue to flourish, and the benefits of prosperity are shared through free trade and global growth, and that by 2030 we'll be deeply engaged in the Indo-Pacific as the European partner with the broadest, most integrated presence in support of mutually beneficial trade, shared security and values. Now, this House has heard earlier today of the benefits ahead of joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. For me, the prospect of the UK joining the CPTPP is an enticing prospect indeed, heralding fantastic opportunities for our exporters. Much as I enjoy, Mr Deputy Speaker, a crisp Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand's Marlborough region, I want to see the award-winning sparkling wines from Dawes Hill in my constituency on the shelves in Sydney, Tokyo and Santiago, not only in English Wine Week, but every week of the year. I want to see Rums's chocolates not just in Wendover, but in Wellington and Winnipeg. A national flagship that can promote our country and our products is surely a sound investment. And beyond that, another means to reassure countries around the world that the future lies with democratic, capitalist, free trading nations rather than dictatorial communist regimes. Such a national flagship will cost an absolutely tiny proportion of the extra £24 billion or so in the multi-year settlement defence, and the return on that investment will accrue not just in pounds and pence, but in prestige and sheer physical presence. Mr Deputy Speaker, we live in troubling and uncertain times. I will give way.
Well, I would say Honourable is obviously a brave individual, because I'm not quite clear where in the very tight, the £13 billion black hole already in the defence procurement budget, where the extra £200 million is going to be found from, and also the fact that it will actually be running costs out of the defence budget. But doesn't he also think that a better way to promote trade would be what we do already, is using our Royal Naval assets when they visit ports to actually promote Britain? That's been done already. Doesn't need an extra, gin palace to be able to do that role.
I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his intervention. I would actually say we need both. I wouldn't agree with his description of the proposed new flagship. I'm sure it will serve many types of alcohol, including, as I've suggested, the very fine sparkling wines from my own constituency. But to be serious, I genuinely believe that this will provide an added opportunity to show the kinds of products, to showcase the fantastic opportunities that exist in this country. And Mr Deputy Speaker, to conclude, we live in troubling and uncertain times. Our enemies are not as obvious as they were 50 years ago. Hostile acts are not always overt or blatant. We are being prodded, we're being provoked, whether through propaganda and disinformation or enemy jets approaching our airspace. We have the most amazing people serving our country. Our government is investing many billions of pounds to provide them with the equipment, training and opportunities they need. This is an unimpeachable illustration of the Conservative government's commitment to defend our nation and our allies, a truly global Britain, confident of our place in the world.